one of our students, one of our students, he is from the ashram in Atlanta, Georgia, and he's currently visiting some family in India. And we haven't spoken since he went to India, and he's there visiting because his father just recently passed away. And I was inquiring about his well-being, and he started to tell me about his daily sadhana, his daily practices, and his struggles with his daily practices. Some of you may know that sadhana is a practice that requires a level of commitment and dedication, and it's not very easy on the mind. The mind does not like anything that is a constant repetition. So we were discussing this, his struggles in his sadhana, and very interesting discussion where he was sharing his struggles in his sadhana, where he explained this principle of acceptance and rejection, where he was having difficulties. He said that he was in the ashram here in Atlanta. It was very easy for him to maintain his sadhana. He was able to practice his sadhana every day. And when he went to his home, he's still maintaining the same routine. He wakes up at 4:30 a.m. and he starts his, gratitude mantra, the Heartspace meditation, the 16-syllable meditations for 2 hours. And then he reads, and then he breathes, and then he does his yoga poses. One thing he realized was he was going through a process of rejection. There's like, can we go here? Can we do this? Can we do that? So he's being pulled in various different directions due to family obligations. When you go visit your folks, they're going to say, hey, we're going to go here. We're going to do this. You're going to do that. And you basically just go with the flow because you want to be nice and you haven't seen people in a long time. And so you kind of lose yourself with family obligations and duties and responsibilities. So he was going through that phase and he was having a little struggle with his sadhana. So then this whole struggle went into this deep discussion about what is acceptance and what is rejection. So I started to meditate. This was yesterday evening. So I started to meditate how important it is to understand this principle of acceptance and rejection. And it's a very big topic in the world because rejection is something that has been scientifically studied and researched very thoroughly. Because whenever they launch any products, they have something called a bell curve, and I'm sure most of you know what it is. And different people at different stages of the product line, they adopt the product at different stages in their life. And so these people, they study rejection. And in spirituality, it's a whole different concept. So I thought, let's spend a little bit of time discussing and exploring this spiritual principle of acceptance and rejection. So I want to break it down by bringing out 3 forms of yoga. Everyone knows karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. I'm guessing that all of you have heard these 3 terminologies. And I'm just going to vaguely touch on it. I won't get in depth because our objective today is to cover acceptance and rejection. So in karma yoga, which is the yoga to connect through action, you relate with this world through the lens of karma, this karma yoga principle. Then you start to notice that this very interesting emotion that comes inside, everything is good, and we start to romanticize everything in this world. And that is one of the byproducts of someone who's deeply practicing karma yoga. We romanticize everything. And then in jnana yoga, where we're talking about knowledge or using intelligence, so then there you see it is all about demonizing, because you start to dissect. Oh, this is not good, this is not good, this is not good. So jnana yoga, when we go through the deep principle of jnana yoga without connecting it to the divine, then we start to demonize everything. And then when we get to bhakti yoga, which is the heart, so we have the body, karma yoga, jnana yoga is the intelligence, and bhakti yoga is the heart. And it is not about romanticize or demonize, but it's actually about the principle of utilize. So there's no romanticization, no demonization, but it is the principle of utilization. And this process of utilization is called yukta vairagya, or what is it that we can extract from whatever situation we're in? How can we utilize it to advance our spiritual consciousness? So this is what the discussion that we got into, that we have to see what to accept and not to reject. It's a common thing that in our spiritual life, that there's so many do's and don'ts that is given to us. Don't do this, don't do that. But the biggest emphasis you'll see is about acceptance. And where is this acceptance coming from, we'll discuss also. So this term yoga, or to connect, is what we all understand, right? Yoga means to connect. But please also understand that yoga is not just connection, but is disconnection and reconnection. Because often we will just think the word yoga in Bengali and other Indian languages is jog, to add or to connect. In English, the word yoke is the root of this word yoga in Sanskrit. So what is happening when we're doing yoga? It is actually reconnecting and disconnecting. And so now let us dive a little deeper. What is this disconnection and reconnection? So in life, in order to reconnect, you have to disconnect from something. And that's why this acceptance and rejection is what we're going to explore. I remember when I was a young child, we had gone to a place called Vrindavan. And those of you who have come to Vrindavan with me on a pilgrimage, you may know Vrindavan is filled with millions and millions of monkeys. And they can be a little notorious. So I remember there was a group of monkeys that used to come to our room. And I don't know how they figured out to come to the room. If the door was a little open, they knew how to open the door, come and grab their food, and they knew how to find their food so quick and run out. And then I thought, okay, so we just keep the door closed, the problem is solved. And we used to buy some fruits and leave it at the window. And then next thing I realized, they would put their fingers through the bars of the windows and they would keep stealing all the fruits that we bought. And so we were getting a little annoyed because at first we didn't know where the fruits were going because they were left on the windowsill. We didn't realize that the monkeys had come in and taken all our fruits. And one day I busted the monkey stealing the fruits. So I said, okay, I'm going to have to teach this guy a lesson. You know, I was also a teenager at that time. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do? So instead of getting grapes and other bananas and fruits like that, I started to order the biggest size apples. And those apples that don't fit through the window space, the bars in the windows. They had a lot of square bars, metal bars. So I bought these apples, and I came to the room, and I was noticing the monkey had the apple in his hand, and he was trying to pull the apple out through the bars in the window. And the monkey couldn't do it, so he was struggling, I don't know for how long, using two hands and one hand trying to pull the apples out through the bars in the window. And it would not let go. And I went so close to the monkey, and the monkey still would not let go of the apple. And it was shocking because I was face to face with the monkey and it still wouldn't go. So then I went and I grabbed the monkey's hand. And when I grabbed the monkey's hand, both hands like this, then the monkey let go of the apple. And then, of course, I had a little exchange with the monkeys. We made faces at each other. I tried to speak some monkey language and it didn't quite work. He was just very upset with me. And the whole realization from this experience is how in the material world we are holding on to so many things and we are not ready to disconnect from it. And only when we disconnect can we reconnect with something else. It's hard to put something in your hands if your hand is already full. So this practice of bhakti that we're practicing, it's really not about rejection, but it's more about acceptance. And that acceptance happens when we are practicing something called absorption. Absorption in one's spiritual self. We know that there is this beautiful 4 levels of consciousness that we have discussed before. Jagrati, Swapna, Susupti, and Turiya. And then I also explained there is something called Turiya Tita, something beyond Turiya. So interesting is this absorption that we're talking about. So let's say, give this example. We are the soul that resides in the body. And then the soul experiences the world through consciousness to the subtle body, and then finally to the gross body. So this great saint, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says, Jiv Jago, Gaura Chandra Bole. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he writes this song, and he's asking the soul to wake up. Please be awake, awaken, oh beautiful souls. And when we study in depth, what are the sages talking about? What he's really talking about is the stage of Jagrati. Jagrati means when you're completely alert. So from the stage of the soul, when we connect to the subtle part of the subtle body and then to the gross body, and that gross body is engaged in the service of the true nature of the soul, that is what awakening means. When there's a connection between the physical body with the soul, who we truly are. When identifying that there's a unique connection, that the body has a need to connect to the very nature of who we are. That is what fully awakened means. And then that is one level of consciousness, right? And then there's swapna, where from the soul, it gets as far as to the subtle body, where you're just in a state of sleep. You're not conscious of whatever is happening. Everything is just happening around you. And this point that I wanted to talk about is the state of Turiya. Turiya is the state of Samadhi. Samadhi means full absorption. Full absorption in what is the question? Full absorption in the self, in its relationship with the divine. And that's when it goes to the level of Turyatita. Self-absorption is Turya, and Turyatita is absorption in the self with the divine. And so this is what bhakti is. And that is the seat of acceptance. And that is where acceptance or the desires that come from the heart, and this is what bhakti is. When there's desires that come from our mind, and generally mind means dealing with the senses and the sense objects in the world. So when the mind absorbs desires from the object of the senses, for example, what you see, the sense of sight, what you see, the mind develops desires. What you hear, mind develops desires. What you taste, mind develops desires. So mind becomes the reservoir of uncountable numbers of material desires, not even from this life, but even from previous life. Because as we have discussed before, when the soul leaves this body, what travels with the soul is three things. Is the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. These are the three things that the soul carries with in our next body. So therefore, the mind carries the reservoir of all desires, not just from this life, but even from other previous lives. So when the desires are coming from the mind and we give into those desires, then what happens? Then the heart desires take a back seat. And so therefore the sages are saying we have to purify, not reject the desires, but we have to purify the desires. We are realizing that the mind has given us many such desires to engage with in the world, but we have to see how to purify those desires and make it the desires of the heart. And the purification process is the process of sadhana. It is what helps you to transport from your mind, desires of the mind, to the desires of the heart. So again, it's not about rejection, but rather transformation or utilization. The desires are going to be there. There will never be a time where we may be free from desires. Many of us can sit in meditation for decades, thinking that we will become desireless or thoughtless. But it is not the process, because the nature of the mind is to think. You cannot tell the mind not to think. I did this exercise one time. I asked everyone, can you please close your eyes? And just for 30 seconds, please don't think of anything and just sit still. And the minute I said, please don't think of something, obviously the mind is like, okay, I should not think about anything. And then there's even more influx of thoughts that come into the mind. So this is the nature of the mind. So therefore, the bhakti practice says, don't reject the thoughts. Don't reject the desires. We have to see how to transform and transmute those desires to make it the desire of the heart. And when we make it the desire of the heart, this full absorption, this is what it looks like and feels like. For example, I'm sure there is something in your life that you are very obsessed about. For example, when I came to the United States of America, I didn't understand this game called football. They play with their hands, but they call it a football. In Europe, football is what Americans call soccer. So I didn't understand this game. And one of my friends during this football season, they have a season for football, he said, Veda, if you if you live in America, you have to understand the sport. Otherwise, you'll never be an American. And I was thinking, well, I don't want to be an American. Well, you want to be able to hang out with the friends because this whole football season, that's all we talk about. And you won't be able to fit in. And I was thinking, my God, this is what I have to do to fit in. So at that time, I was thinking, okay, let me try to fit in. So I used to watch football with these friends, and they would try to explain this game. And for me, it didn't make a lot of sense because they just take ball and everyone just crashes into each other, like almost want to kill each other, and they hit each other so hard. And these people are so athletic and so built. And I just thought, this is such a brainless sport. It didn't make any sense. So I used to get annoyed. And then they started to explain this game to me. And I still was like not having it. And every game they would just explain and explain and explain. Veda, you need to understand. This is what a quarterback is. This is what a tight end is. And there's all positions and what they do. You don't understand. This guy had gone to this college and was trained in high school by this coach and then went to this coach. And this is what his statistics are. This is what his BMI index is. And, like his speed is like, oh my God, they had each and every player such microanalyzed that they were actually playing something called fantasy football, which is an online game of the real game that is happening on TV, and they're playing it on a laptop while they're watching TV, a game, so they can make money and be entertained because they were so absorbed and obsessed with it. And I just didn't get it. The whole world could fall apart, but they were so absorbed in the game that nothing else in the world matters. And I remember, one of the guy, his girlfriend came into the room and she said, "Hi, honey." And he's like, "Hi." And he forgot that his girlfriend actually came in and she left. And then she called him later on. "I came and I left this cake for you. Did you find it?" "Oh, really? You came and you left me a cake?" And oh my God, she was so upset with him. I remember sitting in the room. And that's when I got an idea of what this full absorption means. That you're so absorbed in something that anything and everything that happens around you, you become so oblivious to it. And this is what bhakti absorption means. This is what samadhi means. That you're so absorbed in your divine consciousness, being in that state of divine consciousness with the divine, then that absorption is so deep that nothing else in this world matters. So this is what acceptance are we talking about. The acceptance of desires of the heart. That nothing else in this world matters other than this deep feeling of spiritual internal joy, this inner happiness. You may also notice when you're in the practice of yoga, or in general, we have a tendency to accept people and reject people. Oh, this one's not good enough for our friendship circle. We try to push them away, and we have different mechanisms to keep people away from different circles. And this also tremendously happens in spirituality. Oh, he just looks like a crazy person. He's not fit to practice yoga, or he's not fit to do this. We pass this judgment on people that is actually not a judgment on people, it's a judgment on ourselves, and we isolate ourselves. We reject ourselves in what we call, we don't want that person. We are thinking that we are rejecting them, but we are actually rejecting ourselves. So the bhakti practice is explaining the importance principles of really not rejecting anyone, but rather engaging. Bhakti is not about rejection, but it's about engagement. How do we engage ourselves, and how do we engage everyone in the practice of self-discovery, of connecting to the divine self, or connecting with the divine nature of all beings? So this is another principle that came out of this discussion, how important it is. Do not reject your parents, do not reject your friends, do not reject all of these things, but how to engage with it and spiritualize it. So now, another thing in bhakti you'll notice, or also in our spiritual sadhana, there will be many, many rituals that we do. I know Keshavi one time tells me, oh, there's so many rituals, this is just too much. Of course, jokingly she says, because I teach people how to engage with the different forms of the divine. Like, for example, she worships this beautiful form of Ram and Gopal and Hanuman. So you have to engage with it. How do we engage with it? There's some rituals that we do. So in spirituality, we don't reject rituals. Rather, we try to see how to infuse emotions into the rituals. Because doing something mechanically, it is something that does not reap the desired result that we are seeking to connect with. So whenever we're doing any rituals, we have to see how do we infuse with emotions. Every ritual, infuse it with emotions, then it becomes spiritual. So that means we have to put spirit into the ritual, or we have to infuse emotions. So again, it's not a rejection, but rather it's an infusion. That means we have to do it right. We have to put proper emotions into it. So in this process of bhakti, many times when we have desires, we think, oh, these desires, we should be free from desires. We shouldn't have desires. Many spiritual people will tell you, you have to become free from desires. But in spirituality, we don't say you should become free from desires, but we should examine those desires. When we have attachment, there's nothing wrong in having attachment. We have to first ask ourselves, what is it that we're attaching to? When that attachment is something to do with the spiritual nature of all beings, then that attachment will give you spiritual joy. In relationships, you may notice, when we attach to one another because they can do something for us, because they look beautiful, because they have some talent, because they're intelligent, or they have wealth. We have various different reasons where we attach ourselves to others. And many yogis will say, we should not attach to anything in this world. And in the practice of bhakti, we say, yes, you should definitely become attached, because that attachment that we become is to the spiritual nature of that person. Each and everyone has divine nature. And when we become attached to that divine nature, that means the character of that person. Everything that we have in this world is a character of that person. For example, someone is not nice. That means their very nature has been altered, so their character has shifted. But the very character of every individual is pure, is loving, is kind. That is the nature of the soul. And so the sages are saying we have to see how to attach to the character of that person. Bhakti, in one of this wisdom texts called the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is a beautiful story of a great saint by the name of Haridas Thakur. He was a young saint. He was probably 22 years old. And he was in his sadhana, his deep meditation. And in his deep meditation, he spent almost 21 hours of his time in his deep absorption in samadhi, in deep spiritual meditative state. So much so the people around could feel his spiritual presence. And people started to flock to be around such personalities. You don't have to do anything. Just to be around such personalities is enough to shift your consciousness. That's why we go to holy places like Vrindavan, Rishikesh, because those are places of pilgrimage. Those are sacred places. The energy of that place has helped to shift our consciousness. So this Haridas Thakur, he was in his meditation and people started to come just to sit around him, to be around him, and make sure that he was not interrupted. But the local king there, he was very disturbed. He was very disturbed because anytime someone gets any attention other than the rulers, then they become envious and a little jealous. So what he did was he found the most beautiful girl. They call them the queen of the night. And she was arranged to go and distract him and seduce him. So this beautiful girl had gone there and did her best to look perfect, to smell perfect, and to walk perfect, to speak perfect, to tempt this young sage. And she requested this young sage, can you please satisfy my desires? And the sage, you won't believe what he said. He said, I definitely will satisfy all your desires. Imagine. He's taken a vow of celibacy and he's saying, I will satisfy all your desires. But can you please allow me to finish my sadhana, my spiritual practice? After my spiritual practice, then I will satisfy your desires. So there was no rejection. He said yes, even though she was there to make him fall from his spiritual consciousness, to drop him down a few notches. He does not reject her. He said, I accept your proposal, but please sit with me. Let me finish my sadhana, and then I'll fulfill your desires. So she sat there the first day while he sat in meditation. And he barely had time to eat because just those few hours to eat and clean and shower and get back into his meditation. So she sat there for a day and she said, oh sage, you finished your sadhana, now it's time to fulfill my desires. He said, yes, but my sadhana is not finished. So please sit with me. Please don't leave. Sit with me and let me finish my sadhana. So this went on first day, second day, third day, and this days and days goes on. And she is hoping that he will fulfill her desires. And he's deeply absorbed in his sadhana. What happens? Her desires start to dissolve. all the material desires she had in her heart, a little by little, they all dissolved, all those material desires. And finally, after I think about a month, he said, "So how are you feeling?" She said, "I have no material desires. I am free of those desires that I initially came here with." And then he gave her initiation. He accepted her as a student, as a disciple. And he said, "Now, this ashram that was mine, it is now your ashram. You please live here and continue your sadhana, and I will go to the next ashram." So this is what bhakti means. Bhakti means whatever desires are there with us, we don't reject those desires, we stay with them. Whatever temptations come, we sit with them. But we have to make sure that we engage in our sadhana so that all those desires, all those temptations can be purified, can be dissolved, and not be rejected. So this is, in essence, what we were discussing yesterday. That in spiritual life, in the practice of bhakti, it is about utilization and not rejection. It is about absorption. It is about acceptance, and it's not about rejection. It's about reconnection. And the disconnection is a natural byproduct of reconnection. And this is what the conclusion of our discussion was. Of course, I was thinking that we will have a deeper discussion on how someone who is heart-centered, who is a practitioner of bhakti, how they deal with rejection in the material world. That will be our next discussion. But this was just a little overview of this discussion we had yesterday. I wanted to share with all of you. And this is what samadhi is, and how we don't reject anything in this world. And everything and everyone in this world has a unique place in the practice of bhakti. There's only one quality, I rephrase that, there's only one quality that does not have a room in the practice of bhakti, and that is envy. Every other quality can be engaged in the practice of bhakti. Everyone can be engaged in the practice of bhakti, but just one quality, and that is the quality of envy. So, this acceptance is the natural state of the living entity. Bhakti is a natural state of consciousness of all living entities. And how to connect with that natural state of our being is the real essence of life. How to connect with who we truly are. We don't have to find anything outside or anywhere outside, but really to connect with who we are on the inside. And once we find who we are on the inside, then there will be a natural connection that builds between the individual consciousness and the supreme consciousness. So this was a little synopsis of what we discussed in our phone call yesterday with Nita, and I was thinking maybe we should just discuss what we discussed yesterday. Just two friends having a chat. So I wanted to share with all of you. Thank you so much for your patience. Anybody would like to add anything or subtract or reject? Yeah, please. Carolina, you have a question.
Yes. Well, in that case, what do you suggest we do with envious people around us?
Yes, yes. It's a very difficult situation when we're dealing with envious people. the yoga text explains that when we are seated in the heart, then those envious people will come and do their thing and they will leave. But when we are seated in the mind or in the matter, when we're seated in matter, that means seated in the mind or material world, matter means material world, then envious people, when they come into our lives, it becomes very difficult to deal with. So the sages recommend, please be situated in yourself, in the divine self, in the spirit, or situate internally. Then those envious people will come and they will go. But if you're situated in matter or in the material world, when these people come, then there is a possibility that you may get sucked in to their plot. And once you get sucked into their plot, there could be darkness where you may not be able to find yourself. So therefore, the sages are recommending that we must situate ourselves in the heart, in our inner self, and not on the outside. Envious people are generally, this quality of envy is something that takes a lot of work to purify. And yeah, that's in short. One day we can even discuss envy, where it's coming from, how to actually deal with it if we have any. I don't know if that helped at all, Carolina.
That's very nice. No, definitely. Because I mean, I fully understand the idea of like accepting everybody and just allowing them to be who they are. But I also think it's very important that we protect ourselves from energies and from people that we don't necessarily like. And I feel like it's a lot of effort to be around people in negative environments that are envious or, are just not really centered in their heart. And I think that takes a lot of energy from us to be around them and not be sucked into that negativity. So I do think that we should stay away. But I just wanted to see what you thought and how we should cope with that.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
Mm.
Just another, in addition to that, is that if we have determination to be situated in our heart, this determination automatically means determination means there is a rejection of something. Say, for example, you're trying to go to school and you want to get your PhD and you want to do it within a certain time frame. When you're focused and determined in something, what are you doing? You're rejecting all the party invitations, you're rejecting the mind obstacles, the physical obstacles and social obstacles. You are rejecting a lot by showing your single focus. In Bhagavad Gita, there is a beautiful text where these two friends, Krishna and Arjuna, Krishna is explaining how to deal with life, because that's what Bhagavad Gita is. It's a war. And he's explaining how to deal with war. And he explains, Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana. Ekeha means single focus. And this determination, when we are towards our spiritual life, then everything else on the side, it is a natural rejection. It's a passive rejection that automatically happens to the material temptations and people with attitudes that could alter your spiritual practices. They will just naturally feel without you having to verbally say, hey, I reject you. Don't come close to me.
Yeah. No, that I like very much. I really love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just have to become more determined in our inner journeys. And that is a real key to any kind of distraction from the outside. Anyone else would like to add or subtract anything I have said? Or any other questions? Durga Devi.
Hannibal.
Oh,
Vedity, I was wondering, you were talking in the beginning about, we hold on to so many things, and we also hold on to our practice, and what I now struggling with is doing this yoga teacher training. And we have a student, and she's so dedicated, but she's so holding on to her practice that if the circumstances are not right, or she doesn't have enough time, or she cannot do her full practice, she gets really distracted. So how to deal with that? But ideally, of course, we all want to do 2 hour, 3 hour practice a day, ideally, but due to circumstances, it's not always possible. You're busy on the road, whatever. So, but how to do that? Because if you hold on too tight, we get distracted by it. It's really disturbing our mind.
yeah. Beautiful, beautiful question. So, yoga explains when we prioritize something in our life and put everything around that. For example, I give you an example. This is something I have done in my own life, so you can use it however way it works for you. The principle is when you put boundaries, right, around your material needs, then spiritual life naturally grows. So I have used this example in my own life. What do I need to stay in? I need a place, a roof over my head, food on the table, and a car to travel and do my seva. So when I put my material needs in a box, then my spiritual life automatically grows, because the material needs, when you limit it, then somewhere something has to give, something has to grow, then spiritual life grows. For example, the desire to accumulate more wealth, to have a bigger house, bigger possessions, more designations, more positions in society. Those are all material, right? Because it's related to matter, it's related to the material world. So when I put a boundary around it, what is going to happen? The natural inclination of the soul will grow more and more and more. You will have more time for spiritual activities. You'll have more time to do meditation, because you don't need to work 24 hours. You don't need to work 12 hours, because you can only eat 2 tortillas, 2 quesadillas, 4 slices of pizza or 2 chapatis. You don't need to work 12 hours for that. So you have all this time, and your spiritual life just keeps growing and growing and growing. So the point is, practically speaking, she will have to figure out a solution. But I'm just giving the principle. If she just puts some boundaries around her material life, say, for example, working 14 hours or 17 hours, you may not need to work so hard. I know people that they work so hard. And so just put a little cap on that, and spiritual life naturally grows. Because you'll have so much time. What are you going to do with it? You'll naturally come into a state of meditation. You'll sit on your couch and you'll start contemplating, and that contemplation will turn into meditation, and then it becomes your routine. Does that make any sense? Because individuals will vary from individual to individual case, but in principle, this is the metric, and you can apply it. I tell you, it'll work miracles for you. Just miracles. Material boundaries. What do I need? Because beyond need is greed, huh? So just keep it to what you need and just put a little fence. Thank you, Durga Devi. Beautiful question. Okay, we have 2 more minutes. Anyone would like to add anything or subtract anything? Okay, should be any other housekeeping announcements before we conclude our day.
Just in time for Nitai to jump on. I have the link tree I copied here because I saw he wasn't on, but this is to all of, oh, no, that's the wrong link. Maybe if Nitai has it, he can put it in. But the link tree will give you access to all of the upcoming retreats and events and everything. We do have some passes left, commuter passes and day passes. Thanks, Nitai. Commuter passes and day passes left for the Connecticut retreat. And then we just opened up the Georgia one. And I know there's a number of events in Europe and Eindhoven and yeah, in India. Join us. Oh, and we have a kirtan in Connecticut coming up next weekend. We just had a great one at Divya's last night, but we're going to do one next weekend too.
So for those of you who missed yesterday, it was a beautiful day called Akshay Tritiya. It is a day of magnitude. Whatever you do on that day, everything just magnifies in its spiritual energy. So it was a beautiful day, and it was nice that they had ecstatic kirtan in Connecticut. I got some videos of it. Okay. I think Geet has a question. You would like to add anything, Geet?
Yes, Veda Prabhu. I was contemplating whether to ask or not, but that story, the sage and the beautiful girl, and he kept on saying that, let me finish my practice and then I'll be there for you. I keep wondering, to avoid that, it was to avoid the rejection, but isn't that lying? And is it okay to lie when you know you can't do something, but you still push it forward?
It's a good question, Geet. So the sage knows that the real desire of the soul, the nature of the soul is spiritual desires. You don't desire material connection. The soul does not desire to indulge in sensory pleasures. That is not the desire of the soul. The soul desires eternal spiritual pleasures. Ananda Mayo Bhyashat in Vedanta Sutra, verse number 3, beautifully explains the nature of the soul is to seek permanent happiness, eternal spiritual happiness. So a sage knows. So this young sage, Haridas Thakur, he knew very well, because that is what he was relishing. Internal, deep spiritual joy.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so what all he was doing is to help her see that the material desire that you have is matter, is with the mind, is with the senses. So why not sit with me and purify your material desires? And all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but gradually, through this process, she developed deep spiritual desires. Her material desires dissipated. And that's another reason we actually go to the sacred places and meet with different saints and sages. In Vrindavan, we met with sages, and in Rishikesh, in Radhakund, we met sages. And that's what happens when we go on a pilgrimage with me to India. We don't just take you to the places of energy vortex, but we actually meet you up with real sages of those places who have been developing and cultivating this inner sanctuary of the heart for decades and decades and lifelong. And you just to sit in their presence, you start to feel an internal transformation, an internal shuffle that's happening. So that is what was happening. He definitely wanted to fulfill her desires, and he did fulfill her desires because he fulfilled her real spiritual desires, which is to experience spiritual love within the heart. But a good question.
Thank you so much. Beautiful talk.
Thank you all so much. It's so nice to see all of you. It is such a pleasure to be with you for 1 hour a week. And I look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Namaste, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
Namaste.
Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.